So why would you use a grad instead of a polarizer? First of all, if you're shooting directly into the sun or directly opposite the sun, as I mentioned, a polarizer is not going to do anything that you need it to do. If the sky is heavily clouded with no blue showing through, again, a polarizer is not really going to be effective for you. When would you use both though? Well, when the sky is hazy and bright, and also the foreground is in shadow or darker than can be captured well without the grad to balance out the exposure, then you might definitely want to use both. So going back to this image here, I used a polarizer on this shot because it helped me reduce the haze coming from the mist in the valley and revealed that blue sky. If I had used a neutral density filter, an ND grad, without using the polarizer, then I would have just gotten darker gray mist, and it really wouldn't have given me what I wanted out of that, which was to get that bluer sky to show through a little bit more. I certainly could have used both if I had wanted to darken that sky more, but I felt that the effect that I got with the polarizer alone was exactly what I wanted. If you desired a darker sky in addition to the blue, you could use the polarizer mounted in the View mounting ring, and then add an ND grad on top of that in the View Professional filter holder, and you'll get the effect that you want that way. I want to talk about a technique that's used to add some interest to the sky when you have a good sky to work with already. Using neutral density filters to capture motion and clouds allows you to add a sense of movement when there's not much else going on in your scene. It's the same principle as capturing moving water. Slower moving clouds will require a longer exposure to record movement, while clouds that are moving faster can be recorded in shorter exposures. To be able to capture this motion, you'll need a strong neutral density filter. I'm using View Scion Q 100mm ND filters. They're available in 1, 2, 3, and 10 stops, so I'm able to combine them as needed to get exactly the exposure that I'm looking for to capture the movement in the clouds. Now in this image here, this was taken with a faster shutter speed for obvious reasons. This is a nice little shot of me and my brother and sister as we hiked in Denali National Park. The clouds are still, and the image is fairly static, but this is what we wanted for this shot. However, once I got around to getting creative with this, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I added 14 stops of neutral density to my camera, and it allowed me to slow my shutter speed down to 70 seconds, which gave me this exposure where I have not only moving water that's blurring nicely and becoming nice and smooth, but I also have those clouds that were moving past the mountain and creating this sense of flight as they flew over my head. It really creates a little bit more drama in an image, and it creates a little bit of interest and a sense of movement where otherwise there might not be any. Now here in this shot, it's a nice image as is. I have good detail in the sky and good range of tones. I used a 3-stop soft-edged ND grad to retain the detail in the sky that I wanted, but the scene itself is a bit static. I've got this big rock in the middle of the water and these nice big puffy clouds, but they're not really doing anything, they're just kind of sitting there. Again, it's a nice image as is, but I wanted to add a little bit of movement to it. So for this shot, what I did was I added 5 stops of neutral density to the image to give me this movement in the clouds. I also raised my ISO by 1/3 and opened up my aperture 1 stop. So the total exposure change is only 2 1/3 stops. The clouds were moving quickly, so that was all I needed. A 30-second exposure enabled me to capture this motion of the clouds, contrasting nicely against the stillness of the rock in the water. Now this shot here, a summer storm had moved through the city of Pittsburgh. It added a great deal of color and drama to the sky, so I wanted to get out and capture that. I used a View Scion 2-stop ND soft edge grad, and that enabled me to keep the detail in the sky down while not losing any detail in the building itself. The image is a fine image as is. It's got nice color, nice detail in the sky, and it's one I really like. But I also decided to get some variety. Often when I'm out shooting, I'll try to change things up a little bit so I have a variety of shots to choose from and not just variations on the same thing. I noticed the clouds were moving through pretty quickly, and I added some neutral density to this shot to be able to capture that motion. Again, 5 stops of neutral density was all I needed, and I opened up the exposure by 1/3 of a stop as well. The cloud's motion creates a feeling of movement in the image, and it gives the sky kind of a painterly feel to it, contrasted nicely with, again, the monolith of the building in the middle ground there. So you can see in the comparison shot here, I've got the building centered in the shot, and the clouds on the left are static. Again, it's a nice image as it is, but I wanted a little bit of variety, so I was able to add the neutral density and get that motion in the clouds exactly how I wanted it. And it just gives me 2 different images with 2 different feelings that may appeal to some viewers, the other one may appeal to other viewers, but it's all about getting some variety in the image, so I try different things when I go out and shoot things like this. Okay, so in the past few shots I've mentioned that I was combining some filters to create the effects that I was getting. And there is a technique to properly stacking filters so that you don't get any weird effects on your image while you're doing this. So you want to make sure you do this in the proper way. First of all, if you're using an ND grad in your shot, that's going to be the first thing you want to position in the holder. You're going to put that in the outermost slot on the holder and just slide that in, and then you'll look through your viewfinder to make sure that the grad is positioned exactly where you need it. And you want to be careful not to move it after the fact as you make these next two changes. The next thing you want to do, as I mentioned, for instance, those last two shots, I was using 5 stops of neutral density. So I'm going to combine a 3-stop ND filter and a 2-stop ND filter for this shot. The darkest ND filter needs to go closest to the lens. So I'm going to take the 3-stop ND filter and I'm just going to slide it on the back slot in the holder and make sure that it is fully inserted and make sure that I'm not touching my ND grad because I have that exactly where I want it to be. Then I'll take the 2-stop ND filter and I'll slide that into the holder as well in the middle slot. Again, I'll just line that up with my 3-stop filter, and I'll be very careful not to touch the grad because I don't want to move the grad because I already have that positioned where I want it. Now, once I have these 3 filters inserted and arranged exactly how I need them to be, the other thing I want to do is make sure that I close my viewfinder so that no stray light can get in through the back. That can create some weird effects on your image as well that you probably aren't going to want to see. So especially when you're using high levels of neutral density, light can enter the viewfinder from the back, bounce off of the filters, and then back onto the imaging sensor and give you a weird reflection. So you want to eliminate that by closing the shutter on your viewfinder or covering the viewfinder if you have a DSLR and eliminate the possibility of that happening. If you're using a mirrorless camera, you don't need to worry about that. So I showed you a few techniques on how to capture your sky better when you're shooting your landscape images. First, we used a polarizing filter to help reduce mist and haze and get deeper blues out of your skies. Then we used an ND grad so that you can retain detail in your sky, especially when you have a darker foreground against a brighter sky, so that you can get all the detail that you want out of your image. Finally, I showed you how to capture the cloud's movement in an image by using ND filters to give you longer exposures so the clouds can move through your scene as you take the exposure. I hope you found these techniques helpful, and I hope you'll use them next time you're out taking landscape images. I'm Rick Berk. Thanks for watching.